if you're a horror fan, then you have noticed that weird Westerns are back in style. You're seeing them streaming. You're seeing them in movies. You're seeing them in fiction. You're seeing them in comics. Not for nothing, but I predicted that was going to happen like 3 or 4 years ago. So, I'd like some credit for that, please. I'd like some royalties. But coming up, we have a panel of folks that are going to talk about it. I'm going to introduce them one by one right now. First of all, Mr. Keith Lansdale.
Hello.
Good to see you,
How
brother.
Are you?
I'm good, man. How are you? I miss you guys. I miss everybody down there in Texas.
Weird. I usually get to see you a couple times, but I feel like we haven't been able to see anybody. So
I told Mary, I said, I think I miss my family away from my family most of all. So
we miss you.
Don't tell your dad I said that, but
just don't touch anything. Yeah.
Coming up, we've got Christine Morgan. Hi, Christine.
Hey, hi.
Good to see you, hon.
Yeah, you
and of
too.
Course, we've got Kenzie Jennings. Hi, Kenzie. Good to see you. Wile E. Young, I don't know how he got on this stream. Oh, that's right. You've only got the most popular weird Western of the last few months to come out. That's how you got on this stream. No, I tease. It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too, man.
Where's the energy? Wile E., come on.
Sorry, I've been out fishing all day. I'm down here at my cabin in Untitled, Texas. So
I've been sitting here fishing. I'm trying to fish for the charity. Come on, meet me.
It's magnet fishing. So I've been out, with a big old magnet about yay big, just tossing it, pulling up metal. I've lost 30 hammers here over the years, and I'm getting them back one by one.
You lead an interesting life there in Oklahoma. And coming up, Tom Clark, our moderator. Oh, look at that.
Wile Young's in this group.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was reading a really good book.
All right. Now, y'all are missing Gemma Files, I believe, is supposed to be on this panel. I don't see her in the green room, so I'm going to go try to track her down. But, Tommy, I'm going to turn it over to you. At some point, about halfway through, I'll start throwing up questions from the audience on the screen as well.
Excellent. So welcome to Cowboys and Zombies, everybody, the Weird Western panel here at the Virtual Scares That Care. We want to thank everybody that's been donating to the charity today. We got, what, $12,000?
Yeah, that's what they were saying.
Yeah. Now, when somebody says Weird Western to me, I think classic movies like The Valley of Guanji or Billy the Kid versus Dracula, or maybe you go to a subtle Clint Eastwood one like High Plains Drifter or Pale Rider. Or a modern one like Bone Tomahawk with Sid Haig. Come on. Or Westworld. Or how about, Pale Door that's coming out in August, co-written by one of our panelists.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I also think of books like The Weird Westerns of Nancy A. Collins.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, right here, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's Walking Wolf and Dead After Sundown. Or Dead Man's Hand, rather. And S.P. Santos' classic werewolf Western book, Moondance. And then, of course, you've got James A. Moore's Boomtown. And Wile E. Young's Woo! Woo!
Yeah.
Western.
Nice.
Yes, folks, the Weird Western's making a comeback and is stronger than ever. So I'm going to ask our panel first, what stands out about this subgenre that makes it so appealing? And I'm going to throw it to Keith first.
Yeah, sure. Let me see. What makes weird Westerns? Western has got kind of such a broad term now. It used to be kind of the thought of you go into an old sheriff town and it's the black hat versus the white hat. But I think it's more a feel than it is anything else. It's more an old timey type. You against them. There is no calling 911 to come help. Whoever it is going to have to deal with the situation right there, and hopefully you and maybe a sheriff. But it's kind of one of those things where you're already isolated in some little small area, and then something creepy coming out that you can't really get outside help. And now all of a sudden we've got something where you're isolated with something even creepier coming, and it's just a formula right there to get you started with something weird. So,
isn't the best thing that you ain't got to write cell phones out of the script?
Definitely. I mean, I think that you
Well,
couldn't
that'll take you up to
massacre.
the 50s at least,
Yes.
and the 60s and the 70s. So I wouldn't worry that much about it. And by which I don't mean the 1870s.
Well, Gemma, what is it about about this setting that appeals to you as a female writer?
As a female writer?
Yeah.
I
mean, and the reason I say that is because the Western isn't typically a genre that appeals to a lot of women.
I am not absolutely certain that is true.
Okay.
I do think that women tend to enjoy stuff that's placed in a liminal area, and absolutely the Western is that, because the point of the Western is that you're on the border somewhere, you're at the edge of civilization where there are no rules as yet, or the rules that have been established have kind of faded for one reason or another. For example, the Thing has a weird kind of Western idea to it because they're just so isolated. They're so on the edge of everything, and they have nobody, as you said, Keith, they have nobody that they can turn to except for themselves. No one's going to reach them. They can't even tell people what's going on because everything's down immediately. It's sort of like space in that particular way. Which reminds me, what was that movie with
Sean Connery?
Yes, Sean Connery.
Yeah, it's High Noon in Space, Outland.
That's right, Outland. And Outland totally works within that context because they are so far away from everything, and it is a liminal area, and it is an area that people come to because they want to do a job and get the fuck out. And that's the West. That, in a lot of ways, is the Wild West. I think that women often feel that the rules don't work for them anyways, and the rules are more likely to collapse than you think they are. And so to be in a place where people are just like, well, basically swap your pussy for money or die. Basically, if somebody gets in front of you, kill them or run real hard. Basically everybody is probably trying to undercut you if at best and kill you at worst. There's a lot. And the weird part is that in a space like that, you can reinvent yourself.
Okay.
And there are a lot of stories that I think should actually be explored more within that context. Like, for example, I don't know, the story of the Bloody Benders. These people who came from nowhere. Maybe they weren't even a family, and took on the appearance of quote normal and preyed on those normal, offering by prophecy, and then burying them alive out back.
Wild.
Yeah.
I don't know who's that.
The pod people took her over.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
Mary Sangiovanni made a good point that John Carpenter always wanted to write a Western, and I'm going to argue that all of his movies are Westerns. They're just not placed in the Old West.
I would absolutely argue that he remade Rio Bravo at least 3 times.
Yeah.
He absolutely loved Westerns, and he absolutely loved that idea of being in a place where you cannot be rescued, where you have to rescue yourself, where people just kind of have to depend on what you say about yourself.
Right. So if you've already got this already there, this is already part of the Western trope.
Yeah.
So if you've already got all that, what does horror add to that? What element does horror add to that, Christine?
Well, I think of Western as being a setting and horror as being a mood. And then you can combine them to bring out the best in both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Think of Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Blood Meridian.
Yes, but everything that he writes is a horror mood. It doesn't matter where it's set.
And I'm remiss for not even mentioning that in my opening monologue. Ugh.
Yeah.
Because that book has got a supernatural element to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. What is the judge? Is the judge some kind of avatar? Some kind of dead old god, or not dead, obviously, but fallen through the cracks, not worshipped anymore, except through murder and and destruction, and therefore he only appears to people who are doing that. But yeah, I mean, there's so much. What I like about westerns is that they're a place where liars flourish if you can back yourself up. You can't lie about what
the Old West is the tall tale.
Yes.
So let me ask you, Wile E, how do you take that tall tale and work it into as part of your narrative?
That's easy, because basically every Western true story that we have has an element of tall tale to it. Even the OK Corral shootout, famous for Tombstone, you've got several different accounts of how that went down. And the Wild West has been romanticized, de-romanticized, exploited to its greatest extent, but at the very heart of it, it's truly transcended to myth. And that's why I think Westerns and horror work well together, because basically you're taking two different kinds of myths and blending them together into something that is truly unique in that regard. You have the myths of the old world, the monsters, if you choose to include those, werewolves, vampires, versus the myths of the new world, which are these larger than life figures that exist and are dreaded throughout the mountains, the prairies, wherever you choose to set your Western at.
Yeah. Manly Wade Wellman was amazing at that. I've been rereading his stuff recently, Manly Wade Wellman, and he was incredible at blending those two types of mythologies.
So Kenzie, where do you go to for your muse when you write a Western? What do you set the mood? Do you watch a bunch of Western movies? Do you listen to country music?
Yeah,
I
had
like
to.
Your hair is dancing as you tell this.
True. No, I had to. I had to read something that didn't just wasn't a Western element, didn't have us Western elements. I had to read something and watch something that did combine them effectively. Because I think the horror and the Western is also, we're attracted to it because it's the other. It's foreign to them. It's foreign to us. And that's what makes it appealing too. So I picked up, what was it? Race of the Broken Land by S. Craig Zahler. I don't know if anybody read that. It's the guy who wrote Bone Tomahawk and directed that, which combined really vicious violence, more so than Blood Meridian. And so,
how did you do that?
Yes.
Well, more immediate.
And blended it well with the Western. And I watched a number of movies too. What was it? Bone Tomahawk, Dead Birds. What was the one? Ravenous. That was not
Ravenous,
really.
Yes.
Yes.
I argue that Ravenous is the thing.
Yeah, it's
the same story.
For sure. Isolation in the snow. I mean, come on. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So
if the thing could talk.
Yeah, exactly.
And the whole concept of the cannibal taking the power and strength of the other person is the same as the thing gaining and becoming you.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Lots of parallels with that. But yeah, I loaded up, watched those as inspiration. But the irony is, Gemma, what you touched on, I didn't get any inspiration from the fiction. I got more inspiration from the historical backdrop. So my villains are loosely based on the Bloody Benders, very loosely, because we're not sure who they are anyway. Woo! Yeah. So
I think that's great that you're mentioning that you're using the Bloody Benders, because Keith's got a movie he co-wrote that's coming out next month.
I saw the trailer.
Pale Door, and it's got the Dalton Gang in it, which is another, let's call it a generic gang name, but they did exist.
Yeah.
So what was the choice to put, Keith, in the movie a real, so to say, team, the outlaw team?
If you're talking about the actual group of the same name. Is that what you're
Yeah.
talking about? I think that's just kind of one of those things that it just kind of accidentally happened. It wasn't one of those things where we set ahead and said we're going to use this. It was more, I think, just the name kind of fit more than anything else.
Right.
You know, it's obviously taken a lot of liberties, thus the witches and some of the other oddities that happened during it. So I don't think we're even trying to base it in real in any sort of way there. I think the name turned out to be one of those things where after the fact I was like, oh, did we use the same name? Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, that just a happy accident, or possibly when my co-authors decided to pick the name, maybe they chose the inspiration. I'm not sure. They took the original story that they wrote out and they sent it to me, but it was more a framework than anything else. I ended up kind of rewriting a lot of it and giving it some more structure that it didn't have and stuff. So maybe that initial name came from their inspiration. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I'm not sure. It was kind of one of those things just happened.
So when it comes to bringing in the actual history, I'm not sure if my pioneer novel, White Death, counts as a Western exactly, though it's set in 1888. But I based it off of actual historical events, in that there was a terrible blizzard that happened in January of that year. So I wanted to focus on the horror of that as well. Only, of course, then I threw in snow monsters and other things like that. But it was that history. I read a book called The Pilgrim's Blizzard, which was about the event in question, and built the rest of my story around that.
And then when you do something like that, Christine, the storm actually becomes a character in the story.
Oh, definitely. The storm, it was that man versus nature, and the monsters that came out of it were kind of secondary.
I think that's kind of a lot of times with horror stuff. Like zombies is a prime example of that. This is, you know, zombies as well. Got my zombie shirt. I don't know if you can even see it. I don't know. But either way, the original movie that I wrote was a zombie movie. And it's kind of one of those things where you realize that the zombies could be replaced with a national disaster. It could be replaced with almost anything, because honestly, and you know, the Thing does this better than anything. No pun intended there, but it's because we actually really fear people. We know what to expect from a zombie. It's going to shuffle up and eat you. It's usually not in a hurry, unless we're doing 28 days later zombies here. But we know if you see a zombie, I know what to expect. But if somebody comes up knocking on your door and the zombie apocalypse is out there, you are more scared of that person, because are they a good-natured person? Are they a bad-natured person? Should I just go ahead and not answer? So honestly, it's not the zombies we're scared of. It's the people, and putting everybody in one spot, be it a bad storm that, you know, gives you a stranger, or a zombie apocalypse, or somebody that might be infected by something that can turn into somebody you know. That's what we actually fear, the unknown of another person.
Yeah, the human is the bad thing. The monster is the antagonist, and it's also the moral enforcer.
It's the catalyst more than honestly anything else.
Yeah.
Here's Brian Keene.
Tommy, I'm sorry to interrupt. I have a question. And before we get to the questions that the viewers are asking, I was wondering if I could ask a question.
You sure can, Brian. Sure.
You just did.
It's a question in 3 parts. Part 1 to Gemma. You've had great success with what you would call weird westerns.
Yeah.
Were you expecting that when you wrote your first one?
Not at all. Absolutely not. When I wrote Book of Tongues, which was the first Hexlinger series novel, I was expecting to get very little, except maybe kickback. I did get at least one bad Amazon review where the guy was basically like, you know, most of this is okay, but you should have subtitled it "Bang Your Way Through the Wild West with harsh gay sex." I was like, yeah, you know, basically from the beginning, I knew that simply by putting a queer couple in the front and center, that I was sort of testing the boundaries of what people will allow in a Western. But I was very happy to see how many people responded to blood opera and black magic and Mashika gods and people getting flayed alive and stuff like
It blew
that.
up.
And also a song to sodomy. Yeah.
Always got to have sodomy.
Yeah, Wile E, the same thing for you. Now you're a relatively new author. You're not a household name yet, but you're an up and comer. But you think of yourself as a horror writer, and then you write this splatter western. Splatterpunk and western combined, and it blows up. Were you thinking this would be the book that would make your name?
No, not at all. Not a bit. It was more of a, here's this extraordinarily violent western because it's a splatter western. So I really focused on that splatter. So here you go. This is cheap. Pay me my money so I can get on to back to what I was doing. Now I'm like, well, here's 4 more for you, I guess.
Oh, that secondary group of people who want to read westerns about anything. No, I mean, what's wonderful is that if you do a western, no matter what type of western you're doing, you're accessing a huge market of people, a huge audience of people, more than a market. But people who genuinely want to inhabit that space, and they will take a lot of different stories being told in that space just to inhabit it, and I'm really, really grateful for that.
So that my final part, and then I'll duck out again. Christine and Kenzie and Keith. Keith with the movie coming out. Christine and Kenzie, you've both got Weird Western coming out. You hear Gemma's success. You hear Wile E's success. Does that make you go, all right?
I quit worrying about that just from watching Dad and his career. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where something wonderful that everybody's got all these expectations for, and it just goes by like a quiet fart. And then there'll be something that's, like you never think. Bubba Hotep is a prime example. Something nobody ever thought would be anything, and now it's all of a sudden one of those cult classics that everybody's like, Bubba Hotep? Yes, of course. And you think, wow, that's the one that got you, huh? The mummy in the old nursing home. That's
sucking people's souls out of their butts.
Right. So, I've stopped trying to figure it out. People are going to like what people are going to like, and I just like what I do and hope that somebody else does too. But if they don't, whatever. Next one.
Well, Keen, you were the one who predicted this. And so if it all falls through, we're all going to blame you.
You're all going to blame me regardless. I mean, that's
I
just...
blame Brian no matter what happens. If I drop something in the kitchen, it's Brian's fault.
So, Brian, are you going to write a splatter western or a horror western?
I'm working. I've got a 3-book deal for just straight up regular westerns. I can't say much about it due to an NDA, but I'm working on my first regular western right now.
Kenzie, what is it now? Brian Keene, splatter western number 32.
Number 32.
All right, I'm going to duck out and let's get to some questions from the audience. Tommy, you cool with that?
Absolutely.
Thanks for visiting, Brian.
There is a lot of classic Western writers who remain unknown or unknown, like Luke Short, Ray Hogan, Claire Huffaker. What Western books and authors do you guys like?
I have to say, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in first. Nobody else did, so I just kind of went. But I have to say that I'm going to cheat and just say that, honestly, the most of Western stuff that I've read has been my own dad's. It's kind of one of those things where I'm not actually a big fan of a traditional Western in itself, but anybody that's read Dad knows that he likes to take a genre and spin it on its head, so I've always kind of enjoyed that a little more. So, it's kind of a little cop-out answer, but it's the truth, so it is what it is.
That's a great one to go on, too.
I definitely don't think it's a bad answer, but let's be honest, I got a free pass on that one. So.
True.
Gemma?
Most recently, The Winter Family, an amazing Western. And in that Cormac McCarthy kind of model of being almost Legati-ish in its philosophy, but absolutely straight ahead in terms of vicious, splattery violence. And yeah, it's like that's the best Western that I've read recently that was just a straight up Western where, I mean, yeah, you have these moments where it's like, is the main character maybe a demon? It's like, no, maybe he's just a really evil dude. Who knows? But yeah, the Winter Family, I would absolutely throw that in front of anybody.
Christine.
For me, I never really read a whole lot of Western fiction. Nonfiction, I suppose if you want to count some of my mom's bodice rippers that involved lots of cowboys and stuff. But yeah, I remember mostly the nonfiction. My dad had that whole Time Life series with the fake Western, the fake leather covers. So yeah, I can't really, until recently with all the splatter stuff and Boomtown and other historical authors like Ed Erdelac, I haven't really read a whole lot of the classic, Louis L'Amour westerns. So
I haven't heard anybody say Zane Grey yet. Maybe Kenzie. Kenzie?
Oh no. I was going to say, I already said S. Craig Zahler. Is that how to pronounce his name? The one who wrote Race of the Broken Lands. But nobody's mentioned Amakatsu, who did The Hunger.
No, absolutely.
And about the Donner family. And I read it. I didn't read it for the splatter westerns to prepare for that. I just read it out of pleasure because I like the prose. So, but if you have to put something in a category like that, it's one of the better books that's out there that does it well, but without it being too splattery. So, but yeah.
Ain't no party like a Donner party.
That's right. Wile E.
Okay, so I didn't read a lot of traditional Westerns because, as I said, I like horror. That's my primary stuff. But my dad raised me on Western movies, so we watched all the Clint Eastwood Westerns together.
Oh,
and
yeah.
All of my archetypes and how this was supposed to go came around. My all-time favorite Western is Pale Rider, for sure.
And again, that's got a supernatural element to it.
Right.
Is he an angel or a demon or just a guy?
Certainly true.
And so when I was preparing for Magpie Coffin, I went and watched some newer Westerns, some older Westerns, and I read Stephen Shrewsbury's Westerns with, his weird Westerns he did, Bad Magic, that he wrote with Nate Souther and all that kind of stuff. And S. Craig Zahler, I watched Bone Tomahawk and read Wraiths. But so the one that struck me the most, I think, was Diablo with Scott Eastwood in it, Clint Eastwood's son. And I really love the twist of that Western that really influenced me going forward. And so now, when I was writing, I pictured Salem as Scott Eastwood. So now if I ever get to that fifth book and Netflix needs to come along, it needs to come along quick so Clint Eastwood can play him in his old age and doesn't die first.
What's our next audience question? Can Keith and Joe please make a movie about Flower from Dead Man's Road? One of the best Western horror characters ever written. That's from Outer Poet.
Okay, well, I'll see what Dad wants to say on doing anything. It's kind of one of those things where it's a double-edged sword for sure, but everybody that says, "Hey, you're Joe Lansdale's son," and so I get a lot of stuff that's like, "You should pick up what he did here," which I do a lot of. I adapt a lot of his stuff into comics, and a lot of the projects I have are he's tied to in some way, and it'll be. We just got a review on one of our. I did a book called Big Lizard with Dad, and it's kind of a spoof on superheroes. And it's about this guy who he can turn into a big lizard, And so the problem is that he has all these ideas of superhero names that he wants, and people suggest things. He suggests things like Sergeant Scales and stuff, but people just keep calling him that Big Lizard. So he finally gives up and just takes on the moniker of Big Lizard. But the thing is that we started to get reviews coming in, and people say, "Well, I tell you, hey, look, there's Big Lizard now. Thank you, Keith. There's the man with the lizard." So it's kind of one of those things where we got some pull quotes, and some people all saying, "Oh, this is great. I can definitely see Joe in there. I don't know what part Keith did, but here's this one part that I really like," and they pull a quote that I most definitely wrote, and then I'm like, "Y'all don't even know that's me," and it's kind of one of those things where people may not read it in the first place if it didn't have Dad's name attached to it, but at the same time, I can't argue too much about kind of being in his shadow, because he's got a hell of a shadow. Everybody that knows my dad knows that he cast a hell of a shadow. So it's not the worst place in the world to be, but it's definitely something that we have to take advantage of. Now, that character, maybe, if somebody's willing to pay, but
all right. With the bravado represented frequently in Westerns, how do you balance ego with courage? And that's from Christy Duke. Who wants to answer that one? Let's go to Wile E because of his character.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Because your character is kind of an asshole. So let's go with that. There you go.
Mainly, the balancing ego with courage is that Salem doesn't have courage, not real courage. I'd say he has more of intent. Now, he does definitely have an ego. So, but he has to examine himself, especially in the sequel that I'm writing, which explores what are you without this weapon that makes you invincible. Are you really this dread, big bad, dark specter of vengeance, or are you just a man? And so that's how I balanced it in Magpie Coffin, was that Salem was, he sees himself as more of, this is fate coming for you. You made the decisions that led to me coming for you. And so there's no real courage there, not until the very end. And even then, it's more about, well, I'm just going back because I don't have anything else, and I'd rather die as a legend than live as a coward. So
that's good. Chess Pargeter, my main character, runs a lot on perversity, and which is a weird way to put it, considering that that he's a gay guy. But no, perversity, like, oh, you think I'm not going to do that? Fuck you, I will. And also being able to take a lot of pain. A lot of the things that he does throughout the Heckslinger series are not necessarily good for him, but he's willing for them not to be good for him as long as they're bad for the people that he's going up against. Which is complicated further by the fact that the primary person he's going up against is a guy that he's in love with. So, anyways, I think what became interesting moving through the story was the ways in which I got him to grow up and to realize that caring about people is annoying, but it's actually a good thing. So I don't know if that balances ego and courage or what, but it's certainly made for change. It's certainly made for movement, which I think is the best thing. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Kenzie?
I was going to
add to this?
There's no I don't think there's a conflict in anything that I wrote, because it's all about self-preservation. So more so than anything else.
Okay. Christine?
I think that the ego and courage ties into the whole mythic, larger-than-life, legendary aspect of not just the Western, but a lot of our heroic tradition and culture. I write about Vikings. I write about ancient Greece and Rome with the heroes of mythology. And all that, having your reputation, having your name live on, is something I think applies equally well to Vikings or gunslingers or anything like that. I think it all hooks into that mythic nature of the genre, and that's part of what draws me.
Yeah, that's funny. It's great that you mentioned that too, because that's really what Vikings were about: immortality through fame.
Yeah.
You know, who could get the richest and be the most famous? Boom,
Or
Harold
die well
Yeah,
and live in Valhalla.
right. Keith, how do you approach this?
I mean, we actually have a character in the Pale Doors, the one played by Bill Sage, and obviously in the first part of the first probably act and maybe the even second act, you kind of see him as an asshole, and as the movie develops, you start to learn that, like most people, that's an asshole. It's kind of just a defense mechanism. There's something else deeper going on there. So it starts off as an ego thing and a bravado thing, but really as it goes along, you realize that he's just as vulnerable as everybody else. So I don't think there's anything wrong with taking that personality and putting it up for people to see, just as long as you don't say, hey, he's a badass and he's an asshole and that makes him cool, because
the assholishness is what makes
you
him
don't
cool.
really want to hang out with them for long periods, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where they're great for driving the plot, but if you actually want to make him more than a one-dimensional character, you need to understand why he's an asshole, and I think that a lot of times, honestly, there's never somebody that's like, well, I'm an asshole, and the reason why is because I'm just so cool at being an asshole. And honestly, I think that would be super lame. So, I don't think you have to separate it at all. I think you just more have to understand it, maybe explain it. Probably. So if anybody watches The Pale Door, which I hope you all do multiple times, remember to buy it every single time. But anybody does, just the character that Bill Sage plays, that's the one that I'm referring to. So remember that.
Perfect.
Question from Tim Collins: do you think the Western will ever fade away in literature?
No, I don't think it will. I think it may. The spirit of it crosses over into so many other genres. I mean, into sci-fi. Look at Firefly. Look at Star Trek. Space, the final frontier. that feeling of exploration and testing yourself against the wilderness. I think that's always going to be with us in some way.
I also think that any genre which has apparently so many rules which seem set in stone is always up for reinterpretation and always up for somebody exploring almost the opposite of those things and turning them inside out. And that's to my mind the sign of a live genre. That's to my mind the sign of a genre which will continue living and growing.
And I think for what the Western is, that it has all of the tropes, I guess, that transformed it into true myth. That it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it does have an end.
Yeah.
And the stories that just keep going on and on forever don't resonate that well.
Universal themes.
Right.
These are universal themes.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a setting no different than like the Dark Ages.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or it's an evolutionary setting is what it actually becomes.
Yeah,
that is perfect.
Because it's not like I was saying before. Westerns have kind of outgrown that white hat versus black hat idea, and now it's more of a setting. I mean, a prime example of one that I think of as a Western, but honestly, if you think about it too hard, you realize it doesn't fit the traditional, is that Hell or High Water that came out a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you think about it, you think, oh, it's a Western, but if you really think about it, it's bank robbers in modern times. It just happens to be kind of a rural area with a sheriff that's chasing them. But the first thing your brain goes to is Western, because you have that sheriff chasing the bad guy bank robbers. So there's so much room to do so much with. So I don't think that it's ever going to go away, because it'll fit almost any other format. I mean, maybe the traditional Western might not be as easy to find anymore, but something that makes it feel like a Western, that'll never go away.
I am extraordinarily interested in the idea of indigenous people taking the Western and shaking it up.
Now, that's what I wanted to bring up, Gemma, because there is such a stigma with American expansionism during the Old West.
Oh yeah.
And Hollywood and writers vilifying and portraying Native Americans as savages.
Yep.
For decades. So how do we as writers, how do we overcome that, Keith?
You asking me specifically?
Yeah, I'm asking you first. Everybody gets this one.
I mean, honestly, it comes with the same way as you do anything. You need to have stories told from that viewpoint. And honestly, crackers like me probably shouldn't be the one writing it, but it needs to be stories that are told from their viewpoint, from the good and the bad. From the good and the bad, because obviously when we look back, we think, well, what a terrible thing we did. But at the time, we honestly thought, oh, we're settling America. We're doing wonderful, fantastic things. But for some reason, people didn't have any ability to like put themselves on the other side and go, hey, these are people that we're taking their homes and running them over. So I think honestly, being able to look at it from their standpoint and being able to tell their stories, I think that's honestly the first steps.
Two people immediately come to mind are Stephen Graham Jones.
Yes.
Yeah, and who does? Yeah, he's brilliant. He's just a brilliant guy, and certainly simply by putting Indigenous people in the main character position, you do some interesting stuff. But what I particularly love about his new novel, The Only Good Indian, is that idea of no, you have not only the protagonist but the antagonist as well, coming out of a particular mythology and a particular background. And it's like, the reason that we have these stories is not just because white people do stupid shit. The reason that we have these stories is because this is just stupid shit for anybody to do. It's like, don't kill a pregnant deer and expect to get away with it.
Right.
And the other person who comes to mind is more a filmmaker, a guy named Jeff Barnaby from up here in Canada. He's the dude who wrote and directed and edited and wrote the music for Blood Quantum, which is an amazing zombie movie that is available on Shudder right now, and everybody should watch it, in which only Indigenous people can be bitten and not become zombies. They're immune, and everybody else, and so all of the zombies are white people. And you get people, coming to the res and going, please, can you let me in? And the Indigenous people going, I don't know if it's worth it, man. I just don't know. And just fascinating, and fascinating breakdown of the psychology of people under pressure who've already been under pressure, because for them, as someone says in the film, it's like the apocalypse already happened, but it happened a long time ago. And they've been dealing with it ever since. So it's, both of those people.
Christine.
Yeah, when I was, this question reminds me of how when I was revising White Death, I found a note I left for myself in the margin that said, add more racism. And coming back and finding that note, that was a really uncomfortable kind of moment. It was like, yeah, I know. I mean, I've got black characters, and I watched the show. You watch Deadwood with the Chinese elements and all that, and it was like it was very uncomfortable for me to have to go in and add racism. But that's part of it too. We've got to have the ugliness.
And that's such a hard thing, because whenever you're doing it, you want to think of it in the same way that you think, the way that you talk, and it's
right. It's like, that's not right. This makes me feel
terrible person's viewpoint, and you have to make it make sense. But the problem is it's such a hard thing to make sense. But
it's because you've got 21st century mores in you. So we have that natural block, that natural barricade that says, don't do it.
Right, absolutely. It's called being a decent human being.
That's right.
Hopefully it's called that.
And then there's the surprise that you feel when you go and you research like an Old West person that you thought was a good person, and find out that they made H.P. Lovecraft look like you're the best fucking person in the world.
That's
You
right.
know, and you're
Never look up
you're like,
anybody.
ugh.
That's pretty much just,
Doc Holliday didn't run out west because he had TB. He ran out west because he shot the black kid swimming in the white swimming hole.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
The family kicked him out. I said, go.
Wow. I remember one of the weirder reactions to my series that I got was nice, I believe, white ladies on the internet calling it, saying, oh, it's full of slurs. I'm like, yes, strangely enough. Queer couple in the 1860s? Yeah, fair amount of slurring going on. It's absolutely true.
Well, this is the controversy that professors face all the time when they're teaching literature. I mean, This is do we teach Mark Twain authentically or do we not? So.
Yeah. And Mark Twain, he had his pulse on America.
Yeah.
He wrote what America said.
Yep.
And Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, that N-word. It's just as disgusting as it is, and it's as uncomfortable as it makes us when we read it. It needs to stay there, and it needs to be a reminder.
It needs to be uncomfortable. That's the problem.
Yes.
Yep.
Is it that fear of, I don't want to feel bad that's actually causing it to become forgotten? Well, I mean, let's not say it's forgotten. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. But that's where it might end up is if it gets forgotten. And I think, honestly, I mean, even my own dad, whenever I read his stuff, there's literally some terrible people who say some terrible things. So, the thing is, but if you've ever met my dad, he's the sweetest man in the universe. So you can't tell the story and go, oh, you mean bad person, and think that that's actually what somebody in that situation would say. And
also that allows you to get out of the habit of realizing that every structure has been racist and every structure has othered other people and every structure has been, built on that basis. I mean, I'm Canadian and we allowed ourselves to think for a very long time that, I grew up with the idea that, multiculturalism worked and everything was great and we're all so polite and, we don't do stuff like that anymore. And it's like, no, that's just bullshit. It's like, actually, Canadians are about as racist as everybody else. We've just done a really good job of
You're nicer about it.
Yeah, exactly. Of convincing ourselves that we're nicer about it. But you know what? Even that ain't necessarily true either.
All right, we got a new question from Otter Poet here. Are there any stories from other cultures that you think could fit into the Western mythos, such as the Seven Samurai becoming Magnificent Seven, or Yojimbo becoming Fistful of Dollars?
Yes,
I've done it twice.
Club right there is the Mandalorian. That's on Disney, and that's a Western.
Yeah,
yes, it is.
Yeah, I've done 2 short stories adapting Greek mythology into Westerns. I did one called The Crossing at Boney Ford that takes Charon the ferryman, except he's driving a stagecoach. And I've got another one called The White Bull Ranch that is basically King Minos and Theseus and the Minotaur. I mean, Theseus is a perfect example of an Old West gunslinger. He was a real shit hero. And
all the Greek heroes
perfectly into that mold as a gunslinger. He was the Athens kid.
Yeah, it's absolutely true that every culture around the world has moments where you could set a Western, essentially. You can have a Viking Western, you can have a Chinese Western, you can have a Western set during the 100 Years' War in Germany, in Renaissance Italy, in any place. Germany during the witch trial. Yeah, absolutely. Any place where things become liminal and where things start to break down and where a frontier is established. Any place like that.
Look at Firefly.
Yes, absolutely.
There was a comic I read a few years ago that was the Arthurian mythos updated to.
Oh yeah,
You had like a chosen revolver for Excalibur, and you had an
Yeah.
Indian
Yep.
shaman.
I can totally see that.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I love, and the Knights of the Round Table are all a bunch of gunslingers and that kind of thing.
Perfect.
I'd love to see Hercules done as a gunslinger too.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I just killed my family. I'm gonna go redeem myself.
That's
All these
right.
labors.
Right. A goddess made me do it. It's yeah.
Yeah, Mike Duke
All those
asks.
great heroes were
The Duke of
horrible.
Horror asks the question: do you think these new splatter westerns mixing cosmic horror, magic, etc., are a form of Robert Howard's Conan stories, pushing it forward into a Wild West setting with gunslingers instead of a barbarian? We're going right to the man, Wile E. Young.
Absolutely. That's what I set out to do anyway. Because I grew up on Robert E. Howard. I loved his stuff, and Salem definitely is a barbarian in his morals and morality and what he does. But for me personally, I always wanted to keep the magic and the monsters on the back burner of it. I wanted it to be while the magic is there and it becomes obvious at time. I sat down with one specific rule: no inhuman monsters. So no vampires, werewolves, anything like that. All the monsters are people.
Right.
And all the magic, all it does is just push what was already there a little bit further.
Might be sea monsters that aren't so human in your world.
You will see some monsters, but not in the inhuman way, especially in For a Few Souls More.
No, I'm just saying I'm not a werewolf. Damn it.
Nope. One of my regrets for Magpie Coffin was I didn't have enough strong female characters, and for A Few Souls More, I have 3, and one of them, she is one of the darkest people and can give Salem a run for his money in this. That's going to be great.
Yes.
That seems to be a common thing where the one of the ways to flip the Western trope on its side is push the female to the protagonist level.
Yep.
And have her be the badass, have her be the gunslinger. And we saw that like with Quick and the Dead, for example.
Yeah.
That's a great example, I think, of that.
Rebecca Roanhorse's stuff. Often spoken of as fantasy, but definitely Western.
Yep. Westworld and Dolores.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Hate to say it, that's a brilliant show.
Not just Dolores, Maeve as well.
Maeve as well, yes. Yeah, but Maeve's still controlled, unfortunately. I can't wait for her to break that control.
Absolutely. She absolutely.
Because she's the wild card that they didn't expect.
Exactly.
Here we go. Falling back. Brian Keene.
With the big cane to pull you off the stage, Tommy. I can't see the person this year. All right, we are out of time, but once again, I want to thank Keith Lansdale, Christine Morgan, Kenzie Jennings, Gemma Files, Thomas Clark, and Wile E. Young. Appreciate it. We appreciate you donating your time. I'd like to update you all. While you've been on the feed, we are now at $12,927.
We could have got another
nice.
$70 to make it 13,000.
Well, we've got 2 hours, 12 minutes, and 17 seconds to go, Tom. And keep in mind, our original goal was 10,000, so we've upped the goal now to 15.
Okay.
So we'll get
Brian.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's so great to meet all of you guys and to see you again, Brian. And Kenzie, I really want to hear about your book.
Oh, great.
Very good.
That's what it's all about right there. Yeah. Connections being made.
Yeah.
So. And I'm such a fan, so it's great.
I'm just glad you finished it, Kenzie.
Me too. Oh my gosh.